Hello, good evening, everybody. I want to welcome you here to the Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So, I just realized, just before I came on, I was looking through some stuff and realized that over on Sea of Tranquility, they're doing an interview with Lawrence Gowan of Styx. So, I'm probably in huge trouble right now. Oh, well, I should have maybe rescheduled the time for 9 o'clock instead, but we're here now to do the episode that I've been talking about now for about a week, which is we're doing the 50th anniversary of these two albums. This one's already passed, really, actually, in February, I believe it was, or maybe it was April. And then this one, which is yet to come, which won't come until November, but I'm doing one kind of in the middle for both of them. So we'll talk a little bit first about Fly By Night, which is one of my favorite albums. Still left to come in the Battle of the Masterpiece albums. I still got 2 episodes left, and this one will be on next week's episode. This one will be on the following week's episode. So we've got Rush, Fly By Night. As you can see, their second studio album. First one with Neil Peart on drums and percussion and doing some of the lyrics at this point too. Not all of them, but quite a few of them. Only 8 tracks on this album. Welcome to the channel, Monkey Sensing. Yeah, I didn't think many people would show up because I forgot that Sea of Tranquility is doing a interview with Lawrence Gowan of Styx. So a lot of people would go to that, and I don't blame them. I probably would go myself if I wasn't here. Anyways, back to what I was talking about. So Fly By Night is Rush's second album, of course. Came out in mid-1975. Actually, it was probably more like you would probably call it early 1975. Very good album. Probably up until this point is my second favorite Rush album. A top 10 album of all time for me. It's threatened to move to become my favorite album before against Permanent Waves, but always doesn't quite make it, but this time it might end up on top. You never know, right? So, of course, Neil Peart joining the band makes a huge impact. So there's not much to this. This is just a cover thing, like a sleeve thing on it, but lots of good stuff. So for me, the discovery of Rush began here. My friend had talked about the band. He was becoming a fan of them and told me there was a show on TV. I don't even remember what channel it was, but or if what show it was, but Rush was on there. They did a Farewell to Kings, and I believe, they did Close to the Heart and Xanadu were the 2 songs they played. And so that was my first kind of I'm not really comparing the albums. So if you think that's what's going to happen here, you're probably going to be disappointed. Not comparing these 2 albums, I'm just talking about them. But anyways, Permanent Waves was my favorite. Then this one came on. But the thing about this album is that my friend, like I was saying, a big fan of them, or eventually became a big fan of them, as did I. We were both kind of new to them. So he talked to me about that show. I watched it, and all I could think about is that a guy or a girl? Anyways, a few months later, I was at the library, saw this album in the album rack, and I signed it out for a week, and so I could hear it. That was in the days when you could do stuff like that. I think you can still do it. I don't think they have much in the way of vinyl, though. I think it's probably something else. Yeah, so I had this for about a week. I listened to it quite a few times. And the funniest thing that struck me is how unique the guitar sound was from anything else I'd heard. I'd never heard any guitar tone or any kind of riffing or anything that sounded even remotely like what was going on this album. That was my first kind of impression of the album. Other than loving the cover, which was, to me, one of the best rock covers I'd ever seen. However, I did enjoy my first time through. I kind of enjoyed the album. It was different. The two songs that, of course, stuck out to me were Anthem and Fly By Night. Fly By Night because I'm pretty sure I'd heard this on the radio at some point, and that's the reason why it stuck out. Anthem was because of that absolutely incredible guitar riff that he had on that song. I never heard anything like that. It was fantastic. I loved it. This did not sound like anything I'd heard before. So that was my kind of first Rush move on Rush. I never had followed them up until that point, and then that's when I followed them. Now, I did not buy an album by them until 1980. So that was in 77. But part of that reasoning was that money was not forthcoming to me. I did not have a job. And even though I had an allowance, which wasn't much, once my parents broke up, which they did in 77, my allowance kind of went the way of the dinosaur because my mother couldn't afford to cough up money every week for me or my sister. So that magical amount of money that came to me weekly was now disappeared, and I was only using it basically for I'd save it for comic books, which was my big thing back then, even bigger than anything else, and that's what I spent whatever I had on. So I didn't have any money. And the first, when I got hired maybe about a year later at where my mother worked, and then I started having money again. But up until that, so from about mid-grade 7 through to the end of grade 8, I was basically dirt poor, if that's what you want to call it. So I didn't buy anything. So in 1978, I believe it was. Yeah, the end of 1978 or mid 1978, I started working. So I started getting money, and I had money. But as you know, when you never have money and then you get money, you don't know what to do with it. So you just keep it in your wallet, right? Which is what I did. It wasn't until probably, I'm going to say, the end of my school year in 78, which would have been 1979, towards the end of that school year. That's when I started having money. Well, I had money. That's when I kind of started using it. So I started buying a few things then. I did have already a small collection of albums, maybe at that point, I would guess I probably had maybe 9 or 10. I'm not even sure. And almost all of those were Kiss albums. I did not have anything else other than Kiss. I can't think if I may have had I had the Boston album, of course. And I think I may have had one or two other albums by other bands, but I'm not even sure about that. I think there was that Aerosmith cassette was in there, and there might have been a few other things. So until 1980, now in 1980, I had left that job after about 8 months because I was stupid. But they did take me back in the fall. It might have been in like around October or something. They took me back after I had left it spring. And then that's when things changed for me. So I was still buying comics, but albums started to become an important part of my interest starting in high school. Now, I didn't buy a lot right away in high school. I think I kind of finished off whatever Kiss albums I didn't own at that time. And I got Pieces of Eight. That was one of the first albums. And then in early 1980, I started collecting anything that would come out that I could afford to buy. And this one, not this one, but Moving Pictures, Permanent Waves became the album that started this whole Rush thing for me. Shortly after I bought Permanent Waves, probably in the summer of 1980, Rush became my favorite band, passing Kiss. Well, actually, Kiss, I think. Yeah, they passed Kiss, and then a few other bands passed Kiss. Kiss dropped to, still was in the top 5, but was down maybe like 3rd or 4th, and then they just kind of went out of the top 5 and have never been back since. But Rush has remained in the top 5 since then, only falling out to number 2 for maybe about half a dozen or more years. Might have been like about 18 years where Yes was at the top. But Rush was always on their heels. Wasn't a big gap, and then Rush went ahead again once my daughter was born, and has been that way ever since. So that's kind of my Rush history, and this album started it for me. And then once I bought this album, I really got to listen to it a lot. So this is where it kind of started for me. But then once I got it, the album became a big hit for me. Basically, songs like Anthem, Best I Can, Beneath, Between, Behind, Fly By Night, Making Memories were kind of in the end, were kind of the big hits, the ones that I liked the most. By Tour, that didn't come till later. It was a little bit long for me at the time. I wasn't used to, I never really liked long songs. If you look at the ones by Kiss that I never cared for, they were always the longer ones. But so it took a while for that to come on. The only other song that on this album that never really connected with me right away was Rivendell. It was too quiet. Eventually, I liked the song too. So I like everything on this album. To me, this is an album without flaws in a lot of ways. Very different from some of the stuff that came out later. This is much more hard rockish, if that's a word, which I don't think it is. But it also had some progressive elements. They didn't really surface for me as much until later, but still great. And it became essentially my number 2 album, and has thus remained, combating with Permanent Waves for the top spot for the past 40 years. Never quite getting there. Getting close, but not quite getting there. And that might, like I said, that could change very soon. Welcome to the show, Wade. Yes, you're right about that. I agree 100%. I think the second side is a much softer side, as you said, but both Fly By Night and Making Memories are kind of different songs for Rush going forward. They're kind of the last of their kind in many ways. There's a couple of more that come forth on the next couple of albums, but these two together, both kind of poppy, but acoustic driven and more easy listening to, friendly. I liked both of them early on. Couple of my favorite songs to sing. I love those. They're both great. Yeah. So yeah, the other side is much heavier and is probably stood up better than the second side for me over the years. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about Caress of Steel. So Caress of Steel came out later in the year, in 75. I believe it was, I want to say it was November. I'm not 100% sure without looking it up, and I don't have my other computer here, so I can't do that. I think it was in November. If somebody out there knows, they can tell me. This one has a little bit more to the booklet. It's got all the lyrics, but there's very little chance I can read that. It is so damn small. I don't know that I've ever been able to read it, to be honest. This album's quite a bit different. Much differenter than, like, they're nothing, they're not really similar in a lot of ways. There is some of that hardness on this album, but it's a different type of hardness. This is kind of a faster pace. The hard stuff on that's kind of faster. This is more slow, melodic, and almost heavy. And as Monkey says here, it's a more menacing album and mysterious in many ways. I think it gives that feeling. It feels like something mysterious is happening here. It's almost Lord of the Rings like in some ways, especially the Fountain of Lambeth. Kind of reminds me, and it's enhanced by this cover too, and the back cover as well, and being a little bit Lord of the Ring-ish, but no less of a great album. A Bastille of Day, of course, I think could have even gone on Fly By Night. Very similar, heavy sound, that weird kind of different sounding kind of riff that that Alex was known for. Fantastic. I think I'm going bald. I've never really paid much attention to this track. I like it, but it's not a track I think much about. It's just there, right? Lakeside Park, of course, is my favorite Rush song. Has been for quite a few years. I think a lot of that is having grown up in that area where Lakeside Park is in St. Catharines, Port Dalhousie. Having been there, it kind of, I have a bit of an emotional attachment to that track and the area because of it. The Necromancer, of course, the same thing going on here. The places they talk about on that song, I've been to. I lived in that area where the Don River was, or as they call it, the River Don. But yeah, and it's a heavier track at the same time as being very dark and moody and mysterious and everything. Fountain of Lambeth, not as dark and moody and mysterious as the Necromancer, but no less a kind of Lord of the Ring-ish type song, and very good. It's probably, of all the Rush epic side-long tracks, and I think they only have really the three, I think this one is my favorite of them all. And I think it's because, again, I relate to the storytelling much better on this particular track than on the others. This album, a lot of people kind of think that it's kind of choppy. I used to think that way too. I used to think it's kind of like it's kind of stop, go again, stop, go again. Not as smooth as 2112 is, but still very. To me, it might actually be heavier than 2112. There's a lot of similarities between the two albums. You got one side with basically smaller tracks, although I wouldn't call the Necromancer smaller, and then the other side an epic length song. This doesn't have those two big suites like they have on 2112, which I think really propelled 2112 to superstardom. We don't really have that on this album. It's suites, and there's the same kind of suite setup as you get on 2112, but there's none of that overture or Priest of the Temples here. This is just a nicely, smoothly run story, I think. Very classical in its nature, I think. Yeah, he wrote this he was very young at the time. So when you're young like that and you're writing tracks like these, you don't necessarily have the experience to kind of float out the parts that you want to kind of add a part to, but at the same time you have that energy and the drive, and that's harder to maintain as you get older because things crowd in on your life and you can't it's much harder to spend time writing more complex stuff. So there's a catch-22 there, I think. No, Corrosive Steel is probably my third favorite Rush album right now. So these are my second and third favorite Rush albums. And I think a lot of that has to do with feeling more than it does to do with a bit of quality. Obviously, Permanent Waves and Moving Pictures are much better production and more smoothly, and all the kinks have been brought out and more to the Rush sound that they were trying to achieve. But these ones, even though they were still experimenting in that, I think the rawness of them makes them great albums. Yeah, those are a little bit on these two albums. The artwork on here is quite good. It's very detailed. I don't know if this is a drawing that was made for the album. I never remember reading too much about that, or even on the back part, or if these are just photographs that were taken of something and then they applied it to this album. But it gives this kind of almost mythical, classical, mythical kind of feel to the album. Yeah, I love them both. This one and this one, both excellent. I don't even, at this point in time, I'm not sure which one I like more, but I would probably have given, if somebody just put a gun to my head and say, can we take one of them? I would probably take Fly By Night. Yeah, okay, I didn't realize it was a particular artist they had picked. I've not actually heard that name before, which kind of surprises me since I've never been big on album art covers. I either like them or don't. I don't really give much thought to them. My friend Ben, who often is giving me stuff to do on different channels, he's kind of pushed that a little bit more. So I've been thinking about it probably more than I used to think about it. Yes, you're right. Fly By Night is the first album with Neil Peart on it. Before that, their first album is, to me, a bit of an aberration in the band's history. Doesn't sound like it's not part of the evolution of the band, in the sense that when they did that first album, I think they just wanted to put out the material they had written and play it, and it had a kind of hard rock sound to it. Now, some people like to say it had a Led Zeppelin feel to it. That might be true on one or two tracks, but overall, I've never actually listened to it and thought Led Zeppelin hasn't come to mind. Never really has. It's just a hard rockin' album. Doesn't really fit into the kind of overall development of the band, because I think they just wanted to put an album out, where these other two albums, Fly By Night and then Corrosive Steel, they were definitely trying to create something, and then they move forward with the next album, and then move forward with the next album after that. They were trying to get a sound that was what they wanted, I think. Okay, I didn't know that, but that's good to know. So I'll have to look that up and understand that a little better about this, about Hugh Sim. I did not know that. Yes, I think Working Man is a great song. I think some of the stuff on their first album is quite good, much rawer in nature. Definitely doesn't, lyrically, it's not really a great album. It's not bad, but if they had continued with John Rutsey on drums and not taken in Neil Peart, I think you would have seen a series of albums that more represented hard rock than you would have seen any prog. They would have maybe maybe actually stepped it up a little bit and been just as heavy, but maybe tried to go more down that way than they were. So Neil Peart really changed the whole dynamics of what was going on here. And going forth, they were able to develop as a group of guys working towards a specific sound, which they have said and stated themselves coalesced in what they call the perfect album with Moving Pictures. Now, Moving Pictures is not one of my favorite Rush albums, not because of that, but I think it's more of a burnout syndrome than, it got played so much in so many places and so often that I just can't really listen to it at all too much anymore. And it never really was a favorite album of mine. To me, it was a little bit of a letdown after Permanent Waves because I could see they were going in a direction I really want to go in. But that's the direction the group wanted to go in. So you got to respect what they wanted to do. They always did what they wanted to do, regardless of how other people may have felt or not felt about it. As they say, to thy known self be true, right? So, anyways, both these albums celebrating 50 years. To me, it's kind of hard to believe that it's been 50 years already. I'm just very surprised that 50 years have flown by, and I've been listening to this album for 50 years. And to be honest with you, neither of these albums have really suffered any kind of burnout for me, because I've always listened to them. I've always gone back to them. And even in the modern times where I'm listening to so much different stuff all the time, I would say I still listen to these two albums probably 4 or 5 times a year, which is a lot. There's a lot of albums that don't get more than 1 or 2 listens to in a year. And it's not because I don't like them. It's just because there's so much new stuff that I have that I still have to listen to. Yeah, so just great. If you look at that shelf at the top by itself, those are all new albums. I haven't listened to the album. I've listened to the album in the sense that I know all the songs on it and I've listened to it, but I haven't listened to those particular discs yet. So I'm working my way through them slowly, and there's more to come, of course. So trying to squeeze in an album under those circumstances is tough. But these are still fantastic, as is most of the early catalog of Rush. I just think that of all of the early Rush albums, and when I say early, I mean like the classic era, which goes up to Signals, of all those albums before that, these two have stood higher on the pedestal than the others. They haven't suffered as much draw out as the others have. So that's why I like them so much, I think. Yeah, you're probably right. The Fly By Night is probably the song that got the most airplay on the radio for sure. Bytor is probably the best song on the album, although I have a strong liking for Anthem as well. Those are probably my 2 favorite tracks now, Bytor and the Snow Dog and Anthem. But there isn't anything that's kind of burned out here. I don't listen to the second side of the album with as much gusto as I used to, but whenever I play this album, I play the whole thing from top to bottom. I don't listen to the second side as much as I used to, but I still like it. I think the side A is a better side on the whole, though. And that might be the same with this album. Maybe not as much of as a how do you say it? I don't think this is as much of a discrepancy as it is on Fly By Night. The first side on this, I think, is still really great. I do like Fountain of Lameth a lot too. I don't really have a favorite side on this album. I think both sides are great for different reasons. I just think there's not as big a discrepancy on this particular album as there is on the Fly By Night one. But still, I just love both these albums. Neither of them is, like I said, suffered any kind of burnout at all. And I wanted to honor the both of them because it's been their 50th anniversary. Wanted to pay some kind of a tribute to them. The fact that they both came out in the same year without stating the obvious, that's probably my favorite year in Rush history, because two of my three favorite albums are from that year. Pretty hard to say it isn't under those circumstances. Yeah, the By Torn the Snow Dog track is pretty heavy, pretty progressive, and very different. And if you see the live version that they did, the one that they did much later on the RB50 tour and stuff, uh, it they kind of poke fun of themselves, right? They're poking fun of the song. They know it's just a story, a Lord of the Rings like story about good and evil, but they're joking around like it's hilarious. You know, they never leave anything unlaughed about, you know. And that's what makes them an exceptional band too, more so than I think any other band. They have a almost brotherly feel to them. They're just like three brothers who love each other. And you know, I'm sure they had fights and stuff too like that, but it just never became anything serious. Where, you know, a lot of these bands have huge egos and they're fighting with each other, and this guy's leaving and that guy's changing the band, and new people are coming and going. You just don't get that in Rush. It doesn't exist in their discography or in their band at all, really. They're just like family. You know, I don't know how else you can say what you can say about them. And that's, to me, a very unique quality in rock music. Absolutely killer. Yeah, and you get the same kind of um, cohesiveness in their music because they, as I believe, I think Alex was the one that stated this, is that it wasn't a democracy where one guy or two guys would gang up on one and outvote him, and then they would do it because they outvoted him. They always seem to, their type of democracy is everybody either agreed or they just didn't do it, right? You know, they never would do something if two members wanted to and one didn't. They kind of did it because all three wanted to do it. And that's unique. Usually you get bands, you'll have a couple of guys gang up on the other guy and force the album to go away they want to against the other guy's wishes. And that's really not brotherly love or democracy, actually. That's just using power to gain what you want to gain. So really, you know, that just doesn't happen in most bands. You don't get this kind of, oh, we all agree on it or we don't do it, and which is the way it should be, you know, I think. And Rush is a prime example of how that works. With the other thing too, so once they did these two albums in 1975, and then they moved on to 2112. Now, 2112 is a very different album. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it. It is, in my opinion, a little bit thinner than the other two. With these two albums, they're heavier and there's seems to be backing sounds and stuff like that. You don't get as much of that on 2112, the album as a whole. It seems to be a little bit more of a discrepancy from one side to the other. So you get a little bit of that with the song 2112, but then you have all these kind of different pieces on the backside, which are also very different. And I think they've taken what they've learned on Fly By Night and Caress of Steel and tried to mold it into another sound. So I think that album is kind of a little bit more representative of these two albums than of stuff going forward, which is quite a bit different. Ben, welcome to the show. And yeah, so I'm not trying to say that 2112 isn't as good of an album. I don't want to give anybody that impression. It's not one of my favorite of Rush's albums either. Maybe because I see it as a little bit on the thin side, and I think that's probably the way I view it. I don't know that that's the case. That's just the way I view it. I think of it as a kind of, they've taken some elements from Caress of Steel and Fly By Night and kind of tried to mold them together to get a sound. And then the funniest part is once they got the sound they wanted, they kind of completely changed again and went in a completely other direction. And Farewell to Kings and Hemispheres even more do not sound anything like anything from the previous albums, in my opinion. I see those both as being it's like they went from that hard rock center completely over to this more classical sounding prog music, which doesn't really sound like any of the previous albums. And then again, as soon as they got through Hemispheres and jumped to Permanent Waves and Moving Pictures, again, the sound completely changed. So they had elements of all the albums that had gone before, but had made something completely different all over again. And that's the thing about Rush. I love that. Always evolving. And then, of course, they went off into that synth pop era, but that's where they wanted to go. And even if you look at those 4 or 5 albums, they're all different sounding, but they all sound like Rush. Like there's never a thought when you listen to all these albums one after another that this isn't the same band. It's just the music completely changes, but it still sounds like Rush. Anyways, enough of the Rush breakdown in their history and stuff like that. This is the band I probably know the best because I've listened to them the most, and they've been a favorite band of mine for a very long time. And even when they weren't a favorite band, they were very close to being a favorite band. So for over 45 years, I've been listening to their discography, and that's my kind of breakdown of their stuff. And them being my favorite band, I don't think is as much about them being my favorite band isn't as much about their discography as it is about them as people, them as Canadians, them as hard rockers, them as progmen. All those elements together make them that. And there's no chance, I know this might surprise people, there's absolutely no chance of anybody ever overtaking them again. It's not possible. I don't care how good your discography is, or how well you executed all your albums, or how many big albums you have. And no matter how cohesive your band's been, for how long it's been that way, you're not going to be able to overcome this 45 years of connection. It's just impossible to do. I don't see that ever happening. Some of the other bands, yes, Genesis, Styx, The Who, Jethro Tull, they've all been bands I still love them all. They all do well in my list of, if I'm ranking them all, do well. Jethro Tull has a ton of albums, probably more great albums than any of the other bands I just said. They probably have the greatest run of albums of any band I've ever known. And even they would have a hard time taking over the top spot. Yes, I love Styx. Styx is a great band. To me, Styx had a shorter window, though. They have arguably 3 or 4, or maybe as many as 5 of the best rock albums out there, but definitely 3 for sure. But then the rest of their stuff is very, and this might offend people, but the rest of their stuff is mediocre to okay. It's not fantastic. It's not mind stretching or anything like that, or fighting to take over top spot or anything like that. So that's the reason why Styx is kind of in the 5th spot of my favorite bands for that reason. Yeah, for many people, The Grand Illusion is their magnus opus, their best album. If you ask 90% of the people who like Styx, they will tell you that's their favorite album. You can't argue with it. It's a pretty much a masterpiece. It's not my favorite. The Grand Illusion is not my favorite Styx album. possibly because there's two songs from that album that they play in the at work. They have a overhead speaker that plays for the customers coming in, everything, and it's a what do you call a playlist, and there's two stick songs on it, and I hear them 10 times a day. And in fact, I don't even hear them anymore. I've kind of turned it completely out. I don't hear anything they sing because I don't want to hear it, because I don't want to be burned out. But that album is, to me, kind of overplayed a lot. And yes, of course, Pieces of Eight is the same way. It gets overplayed a lot, but I like Pieces of Eight has an emotional connection to me. There are at least of the 10 tracks on that album, there's at least 7 of them, I think, maybe even 8, 7 for sure, that are among my favorite Styx top 20 songs of all time are on that album. So, and to me, it's the greatest album ever created. That's just my own opinion. It's been my favorite album now for pretty close to half a decade. It may lose that spot, though, in the Battle of the Masterpiece albums going on. It's got to have its. This is one of the albums it'll be facing this week, and Close to the Edge, both very strong albums. So it's going to be difficult for it to maintain its top spot, but we'll see what happens. Yeah, I think actually, if you're going with my top 3 Rush albums, which would be Permanent Waves, Fly By Night, and Caress of Steel, the 2 albums we're talking about here, and you put that up against Pieces of Eight, Grand Illusion, and Equinox, which are my 3 favorite Styx albums, it's pretty comparable. It's a pretty comparable thing. I think the Rush albums would ultimately win out, because I think Grand Illusion is the weakest of those 6 albums, for me anyways, and doesn't hold the same water as the other 5. But I think ultimately I would probably choose the Rush albums. Yeah, the first that Grand Illusion album, um, if I think I'm correct. So I think it was actually Pieces of Eight that my friend had the gold copy of vinyl, but then maybe it was both. It could have been both. Both of them are gold album copies, which meant that the vinyl wasn't black; it was yellow. I remember those distinctly being yellow. Those two. Well, at least I remember the Pieces of Eight for sure being yellow. I don't know. I can't remember if the Grand Illusion was. Maybe it was as well. I can't remember. But those are great. They're both great albums. I'm hoping the new Styx album will soar greatly for me as well, as the last one that they put out, Crash of the Crown, which I think is a top 5 for me of all time for them. And hoping this one will be the same. Hard to know until you own it. A lot of people already own it because they went to the concerts to see them, and they were selling those CDs and vinyls of the album, which no bands ever do at the beginning. It always goes out first on stream, and then the hard stuff or the physical copies come out next. But Styx did it the other way this time. I'm hoping more bands do that. Yeah, you're probably right, Ben. Those are probably worth quite a bit of money nowadays. The original pressings usually are. Yes, I like Cyclorama too. It hasn't really had a full a chance to. It hasn't been in my playlist yet, so it hasn't had the really full chance to get listened to strongly. I've been going through the Wooden Nickel collection first to get more familiar with it. Even though I'd heard all of the albums before, I hadn't had a chance to play them regularly, and I had listened to all 4 of the Wooden Nickels on a collection that I had. So I'm looking forward to Cyclorama will eventually get its turn in there too. But probably have to wait until after the new Styx album, which I've put in an order for it. I'm waiting for the copy to come into the record store, and then I can go get it. I don't think you're going to see the end of Black Sabbath. Sorry. I know that's cynical, but It's a one-off concert. Look at the amount of people that showed up to see that. Phenomenal for a band that's what are they all pushing 80? They all got to be pushing 80. It's one of the few rock bands who all the original members are still alive in. There's a few others, but they're one of the few that are still doing that. I think you'll see them again. I think they will, even though Ozzy is in a chair and can't even walk or stand really, and he looked somewhat terrible to be honest with you. Yeah, yeah, you could be right. I'll give you I'll give you a carte blanche there. It's a 50% proposition, but when their figures finally come back and not just so much about the money. I think with Black Sabbath, I don't think it'll be about the money as much as it will be to Sharon Osbourne, but I think it'll be that they saw such an outpouring of wanting to see them on that night concert that they will probably do something else. It might not be to that level again, though. Well, I think Tony Iommi is fine, and Geezer looked fine too. I haven't really seen the whole concert, just bits and pieces. I assume Bill Ward is just as good as the other two, but I don't think Ozzy's up to it anymore. So they may tour with somebody else. They may, I don't know if they'll tour, but they might do something with somebody else. But it's not going to be the same because people went there to see the original four, and Ozzy is part of that. Yeah, technical ecstasy, although it's later in the originals groups, it's still part of the original group. Technical XD is still a album that was released with the original four members in it. It's an okay album. I think it's of the first era of Black Sabbath, which goes up to Never Say Die. I think it's the most poppy of those albums. I think what's there 8 of them. I think that one's probably the most poppy or radio friendly, if you want to call it, but it definitely commercial sounding more than any of the other ones previous to that. Yeah, so sorry, I misread your quote. It's your favorite of the later Ozzy era Sabbath albums, and I can understand that. I like it. It's okay. I haven't. I'm probably of the original 8 albums. I'm probably the least familiar with that one. Um, and then Sabotage is probably the second least familiar of them. Sabotage never really. I don't know why. I think it's because of the timing of it. It came out kind of later for me. Like those first 5 albums, I got them all within. I think I might have got them all the same day. Other than I think I had Paranoid, and then I went and got the other 4 of them at the record store, all within like the same year. And so I played them a lot. And then Sabotage I didn't get because it wasn't available as part of that group. Then somebody actually recorded for me on a disc, and then somebody actually bought it for me, and then I bought it again. So it kind of came out much later for me than the others. Than those first 5 and Never Say Die, which was another one I bought. So the Technical Ecstasy and Sabotage weren't available when I bought those other ones, so they didn't get as much what do you call uh, didn't get as much time in with them. They weren't part of that original group, so they didn't do as well. Sorry, I'm not sure what you meant by they channeled Queen on that album. I'd have to. Okay, thanks, you Grandizer. I don't really have a favorite Sabbath song. I've never actually really considered it, to be honest. There's so many of them. I could easily do a top 30 Sabbath songs and still have room for more. Yeah, I didn't actually. To be honest, I never really watched that I didn't watch any of the concert. I little bits and pieces of it last night. I found it kind of choppy. And I don't know if it was because we were watching it on a screen with lots of people in the way. And it was seemed to be slow for some reason. Like the music was slowed right down. But they may have done the best they could based on Ozzy's condition. They can't. You can't. He's not the Ozzy Osbourne of the Blizzard of Oz anymore, for sure. I don't know that song, "Thrill of It All." It must be a later, maybe a Tony Martin era stuff. I'm not sure. I don't know that song, or maybe it's on one of the two albums that I really didn't listen to much early on. Yeah, that could be true too. It definitely could have been that way. I found it very melodic and very slow for even Sabbath, who I like that sound with. Hand of Doom is a great song on a great album. Okay, yeah, okay, that would explain to why I don't know it. I don't. The first album by Sabbath, I never. It's the one of the original five that I never listened to much. I'm not sure why. I think the quality of it, maybe when I got it, maybe the particular album I got was kind of warped slightly. I don't remember for sure if that was one of them, one of those ones, because I got these all in vinyl, of course, and there was four of them that were perfect, and then there was one that had a warp to it. Could have been that one, so I'm not sure. It's kind of grown. That album's kind of grown on me a little bit over the last year or so because I haven't had it for so long. It's not like the other four or five. I eventually got them all in CDs fairly early on, and so I was listening to them all the time. That one I didn't, so that could be part of the reason as well. Because you play what you have. It's not like the internet now where you can just put on the internet and play whatever you want. Oh, Sabotage. Okay, that might make even more sense because I didn't remember it being on that album. I think I would have remembered it if it was. Yeah, Sabotage is one of those two albums. Technical Ecstasy and Sabotage were two of the albums that I never got into until much later. Like when I say later, I mean Technical Ecstasy probably in the last couple of years, and Sabotage probably in the early part of this century was an album that somebody actually recorded it for me because I told them I didn't own that one. We were talking Sabbath one day, and so next day he came in and had recorded it for me, and so I did listen to it, and then now I have my own copy of it. So maybe it will take off at some point. I'm going to give it a chance, anyways. Yes, Junior's Eyes is a great track. Probably initially that was probably my favorite track on that album, but I like that album a lot. I know it takes a bit of heat from some people saying it's too thin, they don't like it, there's too much of this or too much of that on it, but I like almost all the tracks on that, including Johnny Blade, which is one of my favorite. Yeah, but that's common, Ben, for just about any group. A lot of that stuff released early on in the 70s. You look at the Zeppelin catalog, their early three or four, well, the first two for sure. The quality is kind of murky. You could easily easily clean that up, I'm sure. Yeah, they actually, I believe they have remastered Born Again. I think Steven Wilson has he not talked about remastering or has remastered that album? That's one of their best albums, I believe. It is very murky though. Maybe the most murky of all their albums. Just sounds kind of rough, like they were recording it on a tape recorder or something. Yes, it's the only album with Ian Gillan on vocals, which is kind of sad. I wish they'd done another one with him, but he had a chance to go back and be part of the rebirth of the Mark IV for Deep Purple. Yeah, so yeah, he knew he was going to take that. He probably wondered when he sobered up, probably, what the hell did I do? I did a Sabbath album. What's the matter with me? I'm sure that that was the case. I'm sure they were drunk the whole time they were doing it. Um, but I'll be honest, that to me is the best vocals album in history by Ian Gillan. His screaming on that is second to none. He absolutely kills that album. Yes, for most people, the Aussie era rules. I tend to be more for the Dio era only because Dio is my favorite, one of my favorite vocalists. I don't think Ozzy may have that sound that fits better with Sabbath, but Dio is a much better vocalist than Ozzy. I don't think there's any real argument about that as far as his vocal sound goes. Maybe people prefer the Black Sabbath stuff done by Ozzy because of his sound of his voice is very different. But Dio was, to me, a better vocalist, and I enjoyed the era with him in it as well. Yeah, I've heard the Tony Martin era is super underrated. I can't really comment on it because I don't own any of the albums from that era. I think I may have listened to a couple of them. Yeah, probably is. I've heard that too. That Queen influence on. It's funny. It's not just on Black Sabbath, but I hear that on some of the new Stick stuff too. Especially on the Crash of the Crown. There's a couple of tracks there that I think Lawrence Gowan, man, he really has that Freddie Mercury imitation down to a science. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I think Tony and Brian have a lot in common, and so there's just a natural feeling of wanting to play some of the stuff from them on each other's. Yeah, it is. It's an underrated album, and I think the reason it's underrated, Wade, is because of the murkiness of the album. The production is not good on it. It sounds too. It sounds like it almost sounds like they recorded it in a water tank or something. But none of those albums are as good as these two. I can guarantee you of that. It's good that Rush. It's hard to believe that Rush is celebrating 50 anniversary of anything. Like it just seems like yesterday to me, and now all of a sudden it's 50 years have gone by for these two albums. Unbelievable. Yeah, it's a good album. Absolutely, it's a good album. I think Technical Ecstasy is probably a good album. I can't say too much about it. I have listened to the one I have maybe a half dozen times. Hasn't gone in my playlist because there's just so many other albums waiting their turns. I'm trying to move it along as best I can. I put two new ones in there today. So the new Eden Song album, and I believe I put one of the Eloy albums in there. Turn It, Turn Out, Turn. I can't remember the name of the album, but Eloy's a band I love, so they've been getting a lot of chances in my playlists because they just have so many albums that I want to listen to. Okay, so Monkey, yeah, definitely he is a great vocalist, but the lack of charisma. Yeah, possibly that could be it. And he probably isn't as notable a stage presence as either Dio, Gillan, or Ozzy. That's not a bad thing though to be not as visible as those three. In arguably three of the most visible hard rock metal vocalists in history. It's hard to. All three of them have something. Ozzy has a very distinct voice. Dio has very operatic, very almost mythical sounding voice, and then you got Ian Gillan, who few people can scream like that, and who are able to hold a song and articulate a song so well. I mean, it's just fantastic, all three of them. So it's coming in fourth to those three is not a bad thing. Doesn't mean anything really. Yeah, I wished I will probably now go and watch the entire Black Sabbath final show uh, when I get a chance. I haven't had any time to do that. I've been making videos and stuff and working is wearing me out. I don't like it. I'd much rather do this all day. If I could make videos all day and not work, I would be happy. You'd probably get about 60 videos a week then. And I never seem to run out of ideas either. There's always something. Always, I'll be in the middle of sleeping and some idea will come to me. It's, oh my God. And I'll get up and write it down somewhere. And then I spend 3 days trying to figure out where I wrote it. Yeah, it's his charisma and the way he presents himself on stage 100%. I don't think he's a great vocalist. His voice is perfect for what they were doing, though. I can't say enough about that, but I wouldn't rate if you're just rating him on vocal ability. I don't think he probably doesn't rate to Tony Martin's voice, but personality wise, he's got to be one of the big ones. Yeah, Glenn Hughes is a hell of a singer, and he's still a hell of a singer. I don't think I've changed anything. I sometimes maybe I'm not quite as close to the desk as I want to be, but sounds the same to me whenever I do the editing, whenever I listen to it just to make sure everything's vocally. I check that before I do anything. It sounds the same to me every time. I did have a couple of videos a month or so ago where I don't know what happened with the computer, but the vocal parts had been dropped quite a bit. And so I didn't notice it right away, even though I checked and I couldn't figure out why is it doing that. And then I went back and went through the settings and fixed it. But yeah, I try. I'm not a yeller. I have a soft spoken voice. So I try to sit either close to the computer or have the volume near full volume. I'm not really sure why that happens. You seem to be the one that has the problem with it all the time. I'm not sure why that is. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's only if I happen to be sitting too far back, but I tend to try and sit right on top of the computer. I could use the mic, but the mic for the MSI doesn't do much difference. I've tried with the mic and without the mic, it sounds the same to me. It's definitely a big addition when I'm using the Chrome, but I don't think I've used the Chrome in the last 5 or 6 months at all for making videos. The only reason I was using it before is because if I had a ton of videos to make, it uploads much better than the MSI. I think it's because the MSI has a huge memory volume in it, where the Chromebook is just whatever you happen to have on it, so it makes it easier to do. Yeah, I don't use the mic for the MSI. I don't find it makes any difference. I've tried using it and not using it. Sounds the same to me. So I don't even bother with it. I do use it if I use the Chromebook, but I like I said, I haven't used the Chromebook much. I'm probably going to soon have to go as my water is just about out and my throat is starting to get very dry. Yeah, I don't know why those Canadian rockers always stick the mic in their mouth. Seems kind of weird to me. Well, it's good that you know Ty was trying to do. So I'm going to. So I should probably wind this up since we are kind of away from the Rush albums a bit. But also, I wanted to make mention to people who have maybe you haven't seen this yet. I have 2 more live streams coming up that aren't into the Progverse. So I'm going to do the prog stuff here. And it's become clear to me that sometimes the prog stuff doesn't get as much talked about as some of the hard rock stuff. So I'm going to do a hard rock one as well, and a Hammer of the Gods, which will come out this Saturday, will be the first. Is it this Saturday? No, for, Thursday. Sorry, Hammer of the Gods will come out Thursday, in which I'm going to be talking about metal, and we're going to actually talk about Led Zeppelin's "Immigrant Song." That'll be the topic. I'm sure it won't stay on that topic, but we will be talking about that a bit. And then the other, also, the other show will come out on the Saturday morning, I believe. So I'm going to do a morning show. I believe it's Saturday morning, the 70s hard rock show, where I'm going to basically just be ranking hard rock albums. I'm not going to do it every week because, to be honest with you, I can't guarantee you I'm going to be awake at that time on Saturday. It's the one day I do get a little bit extra sleep, but I'm going to try and do that show probably at least a couple times a month. So maybe it'll be like bi-weekly. So I'll have one every second week. I'll have a stream in the morning at 9 o'clock where I'm ranking a discography from a hard rock band. We're going to start out with Kiss because I have all of the stuff I need for that. And they're kind of the classic hard rock band for me. Blues rock. I'm not really a blues rock guy. I will admit that fully. At one time I was. Probably in my 20s, I was more into the blues rocks, kind of driven there by necessity because a lot of the prog stuff had disappeared. Most of the bands I had been listening to were now playing pop music, which kind of irritated me. So I kind of ventured over into the blues rock thing, with Hendrix kind of being the main guy for me there, that rhythm and blues sound. But then now I've kind of moved away from it, so I don't really listen to as much blues, although I don't mind it as a mix in. I prefer it as a mix in rather than straight blues. Yeah, a lot of people love blues rock or jam rock. No, the jam rock is definitely out the door for me. There's a couple of bands, although I can't completely push it out the door because I've noticed that some of the stuff that Ben has given me from the Allman Brothers and that I have actually not minded. It's been okay. So, sometimes when you're forced to listen to something, you hear it differently. And I also find when I listen to stuff on the headphones, it's much easier for me to, it registers better with me than it just does by listening to it on the stereo out in the front room. Rory Gallagher, yeah, I've listened to him. Can't tell you much about any of his songs. I don't mind his stuff. He's a great guitar player. I can't take that away from him. Just it's not really something I would spend a lot of time listening to. And there's too many other things that I got to listen to. And when it comes down to choosing between prog rock, metal, hard rock, and blues, blues is going to come out very low on that schedule. Yeah, I knew that. I knew he had. I don't think I saw him at that point. I went to see. I've seen Rush 4 times: 76, 1980. When I went to see them in 76, I didn't even know anything about them. I don't remember too much about it either. But the other ones, the 80, 81, and maybe 82, I think those are the other 3 years I seen them. Like them all. Yeah, a lot of people really like the Doobie Brothers. I like their early catalog, the poppy stuff. I don't really care for the bluesy stuff. Their voices are all very distinctive, though. That's the one good thing about them. I never have a problem figuring out who's the singer. Yeah, I probably do need a new record player. The one I have isn't great. It's not terrible. It's a Sony. It's not bad. It's not actually a record player. It's a CD player because I don't really listen to vinyl anymore. I never really liked that technology at all. Yeah, I don't listen to the radio. Stopped listening to the radio back in when I was working a landscape, so probably 30 some years ago. I stopped listening to radio. I don't listen to radio. Even now, I'm driving around in a car. I could listen to anything or any channel I want. We have like 400 channels on the thing. They give me access to all that, but I don't listen to any of it. The only thing I ever listen to on the radio is the 1940s hits. And sometimes, yeah, that's the only music I listen to. And then I also listen to Megan Kelly, which is the other thing I like. Yeah, so I hear. I've heard that. Brian May's inspired by a lot of people because he's a guy who doesn't have a huge ego, and he's able to listen to people who may be better or as good as him, and he doesn't get any kind of ego thing with that going on. There are some that do though, but he's not one of them. He's very open to that kind of stuff. I admire that about him too. Yeah, I don't even know if I know who Nick Michaels is, to be honest with you. I don't know that I know who he is. I'm not sure. He's probably a radio announcer, but like I said, I don't know much about the radio. I'll give you an example. The last time I was listened to any kind of radio stuff was probably when Alice Cooper had the show on Q107 in the late part of the 90s. That's probably it. I remember listening to his show once in a while, but that's about it. And only because my wife would insist on it because she's my wife at that time. She was a huge Alice Cooper fan. I wasn't, but she was. Yeah, so for those of you who want, we will be doing a live stream this Thursday, Hammer of the Gods, and then probably I think it's Saturday morning. I think that's the time I set it up for Saturday morning at 9 o'clock for the 70s hard rock rankings, which we will be doing Kiss. I'll be doing all the Kiss albums that came out in the 70s only. That's why I entitled it the 70s. So, whatever we're going to be ranking any albums from any groups, it'll always be from the 1970s only for the hard rock show, though. Yeah, okay, so that explains most of it because I kind of got away from the radio in the 90s. I did listen to some radio in the 80s because that was in the time period when when a new album came out, they would actually play stuff from it. Now, like I was remember the new Styx album, Crash of the Crown, came out, and for whatever reason, I think it was at the gym. Yeah, it was probably at the gym, and the gym I belonged to had a radio, and there was a couple guys in there that listened to Ozzy's Boneyard or Dave's Hard Rock Show or whatever it was. And so they were talking about the new Crash of the Crown album. So I wanted to hear something from it because I wanted to go get it. And they talked about it for 10 minutes and then they played Come Sail Away. Yeah, that's part of the reason why I don't. Yeah, I guess if they were doing stuff like they did in the 80s where they would play entire albums or they would go off and play stuff from a certain genre, I probably might have stayed with it. But, and like I said, we have a play set list that they play on the radio at work, and it's the same 30 or 40 songs over and over and over. I can I can't even tell you if I've heard anything in a month or two because I don't pay any attention to it anymore. I just shut it right out. Yeah, I lived in Toronto, and yeah, they had Chum FM. They had Q107. There was a Buffalo station we also got. There's a few other ones, but again, by the 90s, I was not listening to anything. Not even not even remote. Now I won't even listen to so I have Sirius XM on the radio in the car that I work doing, and I get a new vehicle all the time, so it's always a new one. There's like 400 channels on there, and I would say a good chunk of them, maybe 50 or 60 of them, are specialty channels on. They have a Beatles one. They have a uh, what do they call them? The Grateful Dead channel. They have all kinds of different channels. I do not listen to any of them, not even one. I won't even turn them on, to be honest with you. I don't even turn them on. What I will do if I want to listen to an album when I'm driving, as opposed to listening to, if Megan Kelly's not doing a show on the radio, or if I'm not listening to the 1940s big band era type stuff, I will sometimes use my phone to create a YouTube site where I can play an album I want to listen to, and I'll listen to that. But a lot of times I'm using my phone, so I can't do that. But if there's periods of time where I'm not, and I feel like it, I'll do that. Yeah, I can't even tell you about any of these stations. When it comes to radio music, I'm just completely out there. I just don't listen to any of it. Can't tell you a single thing about anybody who's disc jockeying. Can't tell you anything about any of the stations. Can't tell you anything about the music they play. Just when it comes to that, I just don't do it. I have no interest in doing it, and that's not the way I listen to my music. I am an album, so this is what I do. I take this album off my shelf and I put it in my CD player and I listen to it. Now I am going to get a new CD player and stereo system because the one I had before, which was good, I gave away a few years back, and this one I have now is my daughter's. It's not bad, but it's not that great either. It's not a great one. It's not a bad one. Better than some of these little CD players I have, which are okay for when I'm in my trailer and stuff like that. But I enjoy. Yeah, he's right about that. I wish I would kill to have a CD player in the car because then I would be playing music nonstop all day long. I would bring half a dozen albums with me every day and just play those ones every day. But I don't even. I'll be honest. There's many. There's been a couple of weeks where I've worked all week long and haven't even had the radio on. I didn't turn it on once the whole week because I didn't feel like listening to Megan Kelly because I was watching her at home instead. So I would generally just not turn it on. And you can only listen to the big band music so much that it's the same problem on the big band network. But because I don't listen to big band music as much, it didn't bother me. Is they play the same stuff over and over again too. Yeah, yeah, I will probably do that. That's on the agenda for this year. I think I had planned to get a new CD player and some good speakers this year to put in the front room and use the other one that I have out in the front room, maybe in the bedroom when I'm lying down. Right now, usually I'm just plugging into either this console here, the MSI, or the Chromebook for and use my headphones. I also want to get a good pair of headphones too. That makes a huge difference. Yeah, I think I will probably text you about this stuff, Ben, when it gets time to buy one. Tell you what my budget is, and then maybe you can suggest some stuff because I know you have an excellent system. I got a lot of problems with you people, and now you're going to hear about it. I'm not sure I follow you. No, those are just basically my own quirky ideas about stuff. I don't listen to the radio really. I'm a CD. I'm an album guy. That's what I am. In actual fact, I'm a CD guy. I when I put a CD in, I listen to every track on it, whether I like them or not. I listen to all the tracks because to me, most albums, at least that stuff early on, and when albums were a big thing, people when they made an album, they made it to go in the way they wanted it to be listened to. Now we take bits and pieces out of it and play it on the radio, and it kind of takes away from the album. So, anyways, guys, water cup is empty. My voice is drying up. I'm going to have to end it. I do appreciate everybody coming on board here, turning the clock in my brain, getting it moving, getting me to think about stuff. I try to be honest about my opinions about everything too, so that I'm not just saying things to keep people on the channel. You don't want to come on the channel because you say something you don't like. And I'm not going to be mad at you for it. Yes, I had one like Monkey. I had the same thing as you had. That's the one I gave up. The problem with it is that I bought it in the 90s and was still using it into the 20s. So it was probably in its 30s. It's probably close to 30 years old. The turntable didn't always work the way I wanted. Sometimes certain ones wouldn't play properly. I was just getting annoyed with it. I will keep on rocking in the free world. Thank you. Yeah, we'll always keep up. Definitely, I will keep up on a lot of stuff. If you're looking to find stuff out that you don't hear much about, I suggest Brendan Snyder's channel. He does a show once a week where he talks about all the new stuff that's come out. And when I say all of it, I mean all of it. And he's really good at detailing each album. He'll tell you a little bit about everything. He knows stuff. He does it. He really does his research. He's actually near perfectionist when it comes to that kind of stuff. And I learn a lot from him. And I also watched the professor's picks over on Sea Tranquility. I learn a lot from both of those shows. And I usually will take something off one or the other show and do, and then use that for my what's new, unless I find something that I really want to do, which sometimes happens as well. But that's the way I try to look for stuff that interests me. Yeah, that's the best way to introduce use your dad to Rush. Rush is a hard swallow for a lot of people, though. Yep, rock gods are coming. Yep, there's the thing that I've discovered since I started this. Now, this sounds kind of naive, but when I first started this channel, I only listened to about a half a dozen to maybe 10, 6 to 10 progressive rock bands. And here's how naive I was. I thought there might be 20 progressive bands out there, and I'm going to do this channel because I'm going to get all 20 of those bands and I'll know them. And then I discovered that I was way out in the left field. There are so many progressive bands, and not just progressive, but all across all genres. There's probably more there's probably more rock music coming out now than there's ever been. That's how much stuff is out there. You could not possibly listen to it all. There's no way. If I listened to everything that people told me to listen to, I wouldn't be able to work. I wouldn't be able to eat. I wouldn't be able to sleep. I wouldn't be able to get into any particular album because there'd just be new stuff to listen to every day. So you just got to be selective too. Well, the thing with Rush, about half of the, so if you're looking at is Rush a hard, the question is Rush a hard swallow to listen to? If you grew up with it, maybe not as much. If you didn't grow up with it, maybe it is. The thing with Rush is that before you get even started, half of the population will not listen to Rush. Why? Because half the population is female. That's just the way it is. There's not, you go to a Rush concert, you might see a dozen women at the concert, and they're there with the guy they're with, and he's the Rush fan, not them. I did know a few girls who were big fans of Rush. My best friend's sister was a huge fan of them. And there was one other person that I think I worked with who liked Rush, who was a female. But generally speaking, they are not a female band. Yeah, that's the biggest issue. That's the thing that I didn't know, why there were so many progressive rock bands out there, is because there was a ton of them out there. They just didn't get on the radio. And that was the only media that you would hear them, unless you saw them on one of those rock shows on TV. But other than that, you would have to read about them in a magazine, and they only wrote about the big ones. So then all the prog stuff that got played on the radio was only the biggest of the bands, and then maybe some of the secondary bands would get some play. But for the most part, like bands like Gentle Giant, um, Eloy, even bands I don't even really listen to much, just didn't get played over here because the radio didn't want them. And that's unfortunate. Anyways, I'm going to close it out, guys. I thank you for showing up tonight. It's been an honor having you all here talking about all kinds of different topics, not just about Rush, about the 50th anniversary of these two fantastic albums. If you haven't listened to these two fantastic albums, which I can't believe, nobody here hasn't, but if you're new and you're watching this, got to listen to these two. They are essential to understanding Rush, in my opinion. So I want to wish them both a happy birthday, both Caress of Steel and Fly By Night, on their 50th anniversary. I hope everybody has enjoyed this episode, and we will be back next Sunday night with another episode. I will be uploading the topic for that episode, so you'll be able to look at that. I'm trying to after I do the live thing, is to go on and set up the next one right away, so that you have time to decide whether it's something you want to come on and watch or not. So have yourself a good evening, everybody. All the best to you. Have a good night, and take care. From Prog Monster, goodbye.